Is beauty a trap or a trapdoor into a deeper reality than we ever imagined?
This is Signs of the Times Radio with Kent Kingston.
I'm here with Vanessa Pizzuto, who's joining me via Skype from London on the other side of the world. Or am I on the other side of the world, Vanessa?
Well, that depends how you look at it.
Yes, well, they call Australia the Antipodes, but that's from a very Eurocentric point of view. And you're actually originally from the Southern Hemisphere too, aren't you?
Absolutely. I'm from Argentina. I've been living in the UK for over a decade now, but I'm definitely from Argentina.
Okay, great. And you're there in the studios of, what was it, Adventist Radio London?
Adventist Radio London. It's a new radio. It started literally just a couple months ago. It's a new project, so really exciting.
Okay, that's cool. Are you online, or can people jump on a website and hear some of your content?
This is a DAB radio, but they can go to adventistradio.london and hear our content.
Okay, well, there you go. Cool. I've asked you to come on Signs of the Times Radio for us today, Vanessa, not just for a bit of cross-promotion.
Which I appreciate.
Not a problem. But also because you wrote a great article for us, a very thought-provoking article in the July edition of Signs of the Times magazine called Beholding Beauty. And I just wanted to explore and, I guess, reiterate some of those themes that you wrote about there, basically with the aim of getting people interested in that topic to maybe jump on our website, signsofthetimes.org.au, and to check out the article for themselves, or even better, subscribe to the magazine. So let's get straight into it. I mean, people might find it difficult to understand how you could spend, 1,500, 1,600 words talking about the concept of beauty, but you did, and it's actually quite complex. And you started, I guess, with the initial question of, is beauty a good thing or a bad thing? So how would you answer that? Beauty, good or evil?
Well, I think it's perhaps a little bit of both, depending on what you do with it, how you relate to it. In a way, we have both experienced both sides of beauty. We have all seen a little baby, and we held that baby in our arms and felt that warm, and like, I want to protect this baby. And that's the great side of beauty. But we also seen beauty magazines and think, oh my goodness, I am fat, I need to get more makeup, and compete with others. So I think maybe beauty, much like money, much like power, is not intrinsically good or intrinsically bad, but it's actually how we relate to it that makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think you raised some really good points there. I mean, we look at our arts sector, we look at books and movies and films and paintings and photography, and there is so much incredible beauty there to be appreciated, and it's a huge segment of the human experience, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think I actually started the article with talking about an experience of being in nature, walking in a beach in Hermanus, South Africa, and the whole experience of being, your breath being completely taken away. And I think we all have that experience, whether it was in walking down a beach or watching at the stars. And we know that there is an immense power there. But we also felt perhaps that we weren't pretty enough or appreciated enough because of the way we look. So there is definitely both sides to it.
Mm-hmm. And I guess when we hear a phrase like, the beauty industry, that sort of gets a bit scary, doesn't it? That this very human impulse that we have to be attracted to something that is beautiful has somehow been, commercialized and weaponized against us, or against women in particular.
Yeah, I like that word, weaponized. And it's not, it's predominantly women, but these days you'll see even men suffering from eating disorders, having, body image issues, and it's definitely being used against us. We've definitely been felt ugly, and so we can buy more products. So you can wonder, well, if this is the case, how can there be anything good about beauty? Or how can you even claim that through beauty you might get to know God better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you took a little bit of a historical exploration in your article and actually looked back at Christian history briefly there. How is it that Christians historically have been suspicious of beauty?
Well, that's a really good question, because when you go to the beginning of what the Bible is, And when you look even at the people of Israel and the system of worship that God himself instituted, you go like, well, but there was a lot of beauty there. I mean, there was a lot of gold, there was a lot of purple. It was really astonishing. And how can we go from that to thinking we don't want absolutely anything in our churches? We want them to be absolutely plain. I think we became a little bit scared of maybe getting distracted by the beauty, or even making those images or that beauty the center of our attention rather than God.
Okay. And I guess it sort of comes down to like which religious tradition you come from. I mean, if you come from a Catholic or Orthodox tradition, for example, there is a lot of sort of ornate beauty. There are tapestries, and the Vatican is famous for its gold. And you can go into an Orthodox cathedral or something and just wow, you're blown away with the icons and the richness that is there.
Yeah. I was definitely coming from a Protestant perspective, but you're absolutely right. There are still several denominations that don't feel that kind of fear about using this kind of beauty in their services and in their buildings. Mm-hmm.
But I guess even in the Christian history of those sorts of churches, you have big arguments about are we allowed to sing in harmony, or if we're singing to God, should we all sing together in unison? Harmony was sort of seen to be somehow sinful or worldly or something like that. It seems like it's an impulse to be suspicious of beauty all over the place.
Absolutely. I think, to be honest, I think we are afraid of things we cannot control, things that have a power on us. And beauty has that power. It has the power to take your breath away and make you feel weak in your knees, and then we are like, let's control this. Let's make sure that it doesn't hurt us. And in a way, it makes sense that we don't want to be carried away with perhaps the negative side of beauty. But I think we have overcorrected at times, and we have deprived ourselves of the beauty that we need.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you were coming from a Protestant point of view, and those sort of plain Puritan chapels that sort of came out of that era. And I guess it's exactly what you're saying. It was a sort of a reaction to perhaps the wealth of the established church, and at the time when Protestantism arose, and maybe the corruption, as well as the idea that you could venerate icons or have images in your church, which Protestants said, well, the Bible talks against worshipping images, and so they sort of swung the other way completely, and let's have a plain white wall, let's not have any emblems or icons or anything, and let's focus on a very rational understanding of the Bible. Which is important as well, isn't it, to have that balance?
Absolutely. I think that perhaps we overcorrected, and that is so human to do. We went from, as you said, from one end of the pendulum, we swung all the way to the other end.
Mm-hmm. So in your personal spiritual life, Vanessa, do you make use of beauty to get close to God in any ways?
That is a brilliant question, because I normally write things that I'm trying to learn. So I will write about things that I am experiencing with God. And I've been having conversations with God and saying, God, I am a person who is very given to reading and writing and, academic and all in my brain. And I really want to make sure that my relationship with you is also very experiential, that I have an experience of your presence, an experience of your Holy Spirit in my heart and in my life. And for the last maybe 2 or 3 months, God has been drawing my attention to his beauty, to saying, there is a book in the Bible in which David, who was a king, talks about wanting to see God's beauty. And I felt God was really saying to me, this is what I want you to do. I want you to pay attention to me in the way that you would to nature. So I want to be completely blown away by who I am, so that everything else will look dull in your eyes, and that you will be completely surrendered.
Wow, this comes from the book of Psalms, isn't it? You quote this in your article. I've got it in front of me here. I'm just sort of flipping through trying to find it. He says, one thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek him in his temple. Yeah, that's from Psalm 27. So,
Yeah.
wow, that's really powerful. And you make a really interesting point that, here's, David was a man who was known to be a warrior. He'd kill 100 people, 100 Philistines, at a time or whatever. But he was a sort of a warrior poet, and he did have this real sensitive side, and he's there, calling out, yearning to somehow contact or have some experience of God's beauty.
Yeah. And to me, that's something that God is doing in my life right now. He is trying to make sure that my brain and my heart pull in the same direction, that my religion is not something that just happens up in my brain, but there's something that happens both in my brain. But you need both things, in my brain and in my heart, and pulling together towards God.
Yeah, wow. So, I mean, you read the Bible and you read things about, God being in unapproachable light and no one has ever seen God and all this sort of stuff. And then we talk about the idea of God being beautiful. I mean, how is that possible? How can God be beautiful when, the Bible says no one has ever, really seen God? In what way is he beautiful?
Well, I think the fullest expression of his beauty is Christ Jesus. And Jesus said himself, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. I think some people think that Jesus is this loving sort of God and the Father is some sort of angry Father, but it's not, because Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father.
Okay, but even with Jesus, Vanessa, I mean, the prophet Isaiah, predicted in chapter 53 there, he said, look, when the Messiah comes, there's going to be nothing about the way that he looks that is going to draw people to him. He's not going to look special. He's not going to look particularly, handsome. He's not going to be a beautiful man. So you're talking about a deeper beauty, I guess, not physical outward beauty.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. The Bible does say that he was not particularly handsome, and yet there were so many people attracted to him, following him everywhere he went, because there was something really special about him. There was a love that was unconditional and made people feel completely accepted for who they are. I think he was showing the character of who God the Father is, and in that he became the most attractive person on earth and in heaven.
Wow. And I guess sometimes when you encounter, I'm thinking of, an old couple at my church, and you think, wow, what beautiful people. And I mean, look, that they would not make the cover of a fashion magazine. I can tell you right now, they're old and, and wrinkled. They're not particularly attractive physically, but they are beautiful people. And that beauty does really shine out of their face and in just the way they interact with people. It's incredible to see.
Many years ago, I was in India on a particular trip with a humanitarian organization, and we were taken to this orphanage, and we were allowed to hold these little babies. And I remember holding one of them, this little girl, and she was way too small and way too tiny, and physically she was not beautiful in the way that you would say. But I remember looking at her, looking into her eyes, and thinking, this girl is a daughter of God. And I remember that I was overwhelmed by this feeling of love towards this baby, and I saw her beautiful after that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, Jesus, said himself, he said, look, if you're there looking after someone who he defined as the least of these, talking about the people at the bottom of the pile in society, and he mentioned people who are strangers, people who are, need clothes, people who are sick, people who are in prison, and he said, if you're looking after these people, it's as if you're looking after me. And I guess the obvious implication of that is exactly what you say you've experienced, that when you look into the face of someone like that, you actually recognize, the face of God, their creator, in that person that he's created. Yeah. It's profound.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned before about your experience on the beach there, and I'd like to talk about natural beauty for a little while, because this has been something that's been really powerful for me. I remember when I was at university one morning, I mean, I had a very sort of intellectual understanding of God at the time, and I decided to become a Christian basically on the strength of my will, because I thought, well, that makes sense, God is the ruler of the universe. He knows what's best for me, so I will hand over my life to him. That was a hard decision to make, but I made it, and it was a really important step for me. But it didn't really reach into my spirit, I guess you could say. And I remember one morning being at university there. I came early in the morning for an early class or to get into the library, or, the bus came early, or I can't remember what it was. But I was sitting there, the sun was still slanting through, golden sun, and there were these big, giant eucalyptus trees there, and a little creek and everything, and these birds sort of, in the branches. And suddenly I was just struck with this incredible beauty and incredible complexity that was right there in front of me, that I'd walked past over and over and over again. But suddenly I had this real sense. And for me, that was a very deep spiritual experience. And I really felt I experienced God in that moment. Can you relate to that?
Absolutely, 100%. And in fact, when you go to the beginning, to the book of Genesis, which is the first book in the Bible, it says that God put Adam and Eve, the first couple, in a garden. And that says something. They were surrounded by nature and by beauty 24/7. This was the plan, the original plan. In the article, I mentioned a little bit of science, a bit on science that talks about the science of awe. And it's this point of what being surrounded by beauty, surrounded by nature, and how it makes you feel small is actually a good thing for you, and it makes you more generous, and it makes you cooperate with other people. It makes perfect sense because we were meant to be surrounded by beauty. This is the way God intended it.
How does that work? How does looking at a beautiful natural scene make you more generous?
So one of the studies they did, they had two groups of people, and they made one of them look at a eucalyptus tree, actually, as you were mentioning it earlier. Yes. And then another group, they were just looking at this just plain building, just that, looking at a building. After doing this for just 1 minute, what happened is some of the people that came with a team of investigators dropped some pens on the floor just to see what would happen. And the people who were looking at the eucalyptus trees and they had this majestic view cooperated a lot more in picking up those pencils and handing them back to the people than those who were just looking at the plain, nondescriptive building. And I think that's, wow, you think about it, just by looking at something beautiful, people were a lot more generous and a lot more cooperative, which is an incredible thought.
Wow, yeah, it is. I mean, it doesn't seem to connect logically, but I mean, the science, demonstrates that there is something in the appreciation of beauty that makes us nicer, kinder people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, is that hard for people who live in a city, for example, like in London, for example? Is it difficult to get your sort of fix of natural beauty living somewhere like that?
That's the good point, because not everybody will have the chance to live surrounded by natural beauty. But even if you live in a city, you can be intentional about looking for those moments that will give you goosebumps. So whether you are walking down the street and you see a performing artist, or whether you're peeking out of your window just to see the clouds and the sun, or whether you go to a museum to appreciate some paintings, you just make sure that you have moments, intentional moments, in which you actually you get yourself submerged in beauty, because it does make a difference. I was talking to my mom this week, and she went to the beach with my dad, and she was saying the difference that it had for her to be able to see the sunrise and the sunset every day. Of course, she could do this back home as well, but she will have to maybe change her lifestyle. But perhaps that's a good thing. Yeah. Perhaps that's something that will make a difference that is worth it, that makes it worthwhile.
Wow, yeah, that is incredible. I'd like to run an idea past you that sort of, I guess, goes on a little further from where you went in the article. The idea that from a basic functional point of view, beauty doesn't really have a lot of point. I mean, if for example, you accepted a sort of evolutionary point of view of where life came from and what we're doing here on this planet, you'd sort of think that the caveman that stopped to admire the sunset is probably the caveman who would be taken from behind by the saber-toothed tiger. You know what I mean?
Yes, which absolutely.
Which kind of makes me think, well, what is the point of being able to appreciate beauty from that point of view? I guess for me, the fact that there is beauty there is evidence of God's existence, is evidence that there is something transcendent going on in this universe that is more than just our everyday needs and just getting food into our mouths and shelter over our heads. I mean, am I taking that too far, or do you
I don't think so. This is a theological question that is quite old, and actually many people have wrestled with before. Why is the point? What is beauty out there? And not just out there, but in there. Sometimes I think that we can, those Russian dolls that you have one inside the other, inside the other, inside the other.
Yes.
Like if you look outside, there is beauty, but if you look at the way your body functions, on every level, there is beauty. And you can wonder why? Why even bother? I think it definitely is a pointer towards someone who wants us to experience beauty as a way to get closer to Him, as a way to get closer to God.
Yeah. And I guess there's so much complexity in our world. I mean, for example, if there was a fruit or a vegetable that would give us all our complete nutritional needs, wouldn't that be easier just to be able to eat that and we'd be sorted? But instead we have this incredible variety of fruits and vegetables and leaves and all the different ways we can prepare the food that makes the experience of eating an aesthetic experience, an experience that involves
it's a pleasure.
Beauty.
Yeah, it involves beauty, and there's texture, and there is color. Why is there color? Absolutely. We could have just one pill that feeds us and gives us all the nutritional values that we need, but instead we have this fantastic array of fruits and vegetables, and colors and texture is exotic. It's fantastic. That maybe that's a reason for it.
Yeah. And you talked before, about your mother enjoying the sunset there and enjoying the beach. And I guess it made me think that, sometimes the arts can be a great way to help us focus on that beauty, like whether it's photography or whether it's, I think you mentioned you like to journal.
I do.
Or whether it's sketching or whether it's dance, or there are so many different ways to, I guess, try to reflect that beauty that we see around us and to try to, I don't know if capture is the right word, but we do try to capture it sometimes, but at least to pay, homage to it and to praise the God who made it.
Absolutely. That's one way to do it. You could also incorporate this in the way you pray. If you go to the book of Psalms once again, there is constant appreciation of the beauty of God and the beauty of creation. And you could do this when you pray. You could either pray aloud and say, God, this sky looks beautiful. Thank you for my dog. Or you could write it. I find that writing my prayers works better for me because I remain focused. So journaling is another way. But this is definitely a way to be part, to get yourself immersed in that beauty.
And like you say, the people who wrote the Psalms, David among them, they like to look for what was in their heart, or look at, I think David said, consider the skies, the stars, and your handiwork, God. This sort of language, and he sort of wrote that down in a song, and composed a song, and that can be a really powerful way. And I'm not much of a songwriter, but I certainly get a lot out of looking through the Psalms and finding the words there that I guess capture something that I feel, that reflects the awe that I feel, and that can be a really profound experience.
One of my favorite parts of going to church is taking part in song and listening. I pay a lot of attention to the lyrics because I love words, but I think it's a fantastic experience to be able, because sometimes you don't know how to express something, and then you hear this song and it just resonates with the feeling that you had, and the Psalms do the same, and it's just a fantastic opportunity.
Oh, that's incredible. Hey, thanks so much, Vanessa, for writing that article for us, and thanks so much for being on Signs of the Times Radio. So if you'd like to read that article for yourself, check it out on signsofthetimes.org.au. It's certainly worth a read, and I'm really happy, Vanessa, to know that you're going to be writing for us again. Looking forward to seeing more of your work in print.
Thank you very much, Ken. A pleasure to be on your podcast show.
Today's episode was based on an article appearing in this month's Signs of the Times magazine. A subscription is just $26 for 11 issues a year. To find out more, visit signsofthetimes.org.au. Signs of the Times has been published in Australia since 1886 and is proudly produced by Adventist Media.
This is an Adventist Media podcast.